Hello and welcome to Addicted to Lacrosse. This is Season 3, Episode 8. Today is Sunday, February the 21st, 2016. My name is Graham Perro. With me today is Melissa Daphne. Unfortunately, Tyler Fitch is not available tonight, so we will have to do without him. And we have a pretty good show tonight. Not a lot to talk about, quite honestly, because Melissa and I didn't see half of the games. So we'll touch on those, but we won't have too much to say about a couple of them. The other two are pretty darn exciting, so I know I have a few comments about those. And then we'll get to our predictions as well. A little bit of news this week, not much. The only news that really came down was that the Stealth announced some coaching changes. Kyle Sorensen, who has been their defensive coach this year, is now the assistant general manager, where Clay Richardson is now the defensive coach. Now, I don't know much about what's going on here, other than I believe Sorensen has been unavailable for the last couple of games. I don't know if this is a work commitments kind of thing or something like that, but it sounded kind of like we're not entirely sure that Sorensen's going to be available for a lot of our games. So, and this is just what it sounded like to me. There was no real statement about it, but it sounded like we don't know if Sorensen's going to be around, so we'll get somebody else to be the defensive coach, keep Sorensen in the loop as the assistant GM, and make sure he's still part of the organization and feels like he's contributing and is definitely a part of everything. So, yeah, I don't really know much more about it than that. Melissa, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is actually the first I've heard about it. It definitely was kind of a surprise. So it'll be interesting to see how this impacts them. Obviously, based on just the score alone, it seems like it may have had an impact this weekend.
Yeah, so I guess we'll keep following that and see what's going on with the Stealth there. So that's it for news. Not much to go on there. Games this weekend. Well, there were some pretty exciting games this weekend. I saw the Toronto game on Friday, and I saw part of the Vancouver game yesterday, and those were pretty awesome games, I have to say. So, starting with the Toronto game on Friday in Toronto, Toronto 14, Buffalo 12. Toronto finally in the win column. This was a really good game, and I have to say, the Bandits scored 2 goals in the first 2 minutes or so of the game. I think it was a minute and a half, and Buffalo's up 2-0. Toronto didn't look really sharp. The offense was bouncing around. It just kind of looked like the first couple of games. Then Nick Rose really settled down after that. He played really well in the rest of the first half. The defense kind of got it together, and they started playing really well. The Bandits didn't score again in the first quarter. The Rock never scored at all in the first quarter either. And there were certainly times in the first quarter where I thought, okay, this is not going to be good. This might end up being one of these 19-5 kind of games. If we're lucky, it'll be a 19-12 kind of game, and the offense will get going at some point. But it didn't look good at all. Then the Rock really started to pour it on in the second. And, I had the games up here. Where did it go? Yeah, there it goes. So they did score 4 straight, took the lead. And then Buffalo scored 4 straight and took the lead back. And then it just bounced back and forth from there. And the game was tied at 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 and 11. And Dane Smith was everywhere, as per usual. Dan Lintner scored a couple of goals for the Rock. That was nice to see. Casey Byrne scored, Colin Doyle, Rob Hellier, LeBlanc. Yeah, the scoring for the Rock was all over the place. The scoring for the Bandits was mainly Benesh and Smith, which is not surprising. But it was certainly nice to see the Rock offense get going, particularly against a very fast Buffalo defense. And transition didn't seem to come into it as much as I might have expected from the Bandits. And part of that was because the Bandits kept getting that they used to be known for. They would just take dumb penalties all the time, and as long as they could keep themselves out of the box, they had a good chance to win the game. But if they were in the box all the time, they were killing penalties for half the game. They couldn't do that. And that it wasn't quite to that extent, but certainly in the first half, there were penalties all over the place. And yeah, it was kind of, it seemed like they were taking a lot of dumb penalties, quite honestly. and the Rock would capitalize on some of them. They had a bunch of power play goals. So it was a good game. The Rock finally pulled away in the fourth quarter, and then the goal I guess everyone's talking about was Nick Rose scoring the first goalie goal in about a year. It was kind of weird because the Bandits had pulled their goalie. They were only down by down by 2 at this point, with 4 minutes left in the game, 3 minutes left in the game. And so certainly a couple of goals in 2 minutes is doable in this game without any question. And one of the Buffalo players took a shot. Rose stopped it, and he came up with the ball, looked down the field. There was really nobody to pass to because the defense was still on the floor. I guess nobody had started running up the floor in transition. And he looked down, and there was no goalie there. There was no goalie running out there. So he just said, what the hell? We got 8 seconds to get it over. I've already used up 2 or 3 of them looking around. So he just launched it down, straight down, right in the goal. Nice. So that was pretty impressive. I don't know how often goalies actually practice that kind of thing, but it was nice to see Rose pick that up. And oddly enough, he let in one more goal from Alex Keto-Hill. And if he had let in another goal, that would have been the game winner from Rose. So that would have been a little weird. Anyway, pretty good all-around effort from the Rock. They get on the win column. And pretty exciting game. I guess you didn't see this one, Melissa, but any comments on that?
Unfortunately, no. Since this was Friday, I was unable to watch it, and it was on Fox. But like you said, anytime you have a goalie goal, there is always an extra fun, crazy factor to it. I remember when G. Nash scored one at the Pepsi Center, the crowd just went so crazy. It was just really great. And sometimes that can be the difference in a game. Like you said, that almost was the game winner. And so I do know that at least the goalies I've spoke to, have said that yes, they do practice that, not very much because the chance of them using it is slim, but it is definitely a kind of a notch for a goalie to be able to say, yeah, I got a goal. You know, you don't see that very often. You usually just see them on the assist column. But like you said, it looks like Dane Smith and Ryan Benesh are really just a good tandem for the Bandits. And they are really just playing really strong, at least especially in this game. It's interesting what you were saying about the penalties, considering just last week, what were we talking about? Wow, the Bandits hardly have any penalties. They are actually playing really disciplined this year. And then all that goes out the door, in one game. So there's definitely something amusing about the fact that they've been playing so disciplined all season, and this game really just brought back the old Bandits, and it sounds like it may have actually cost them the game this time. And as for the Rock, it's great to see them finally get that monkey off their back. We've been wondering all season how long it might take, and the fact they had such a wide distribution of goals, I think, is really impressive. You didn't have one player just standing up. You kind of had everybody finding their groove in this game. And it's going to be really interesting to see what they do going into the next game. Although it looks like they have next week off. Or no, they're playing Rochester.
Yeah,
they're playing Rochester.
They're playing Rochester, yes, next weekend.
So yeah, it's going to be really interesting, and I think very telling next week whether this game against the Bandits was just a bit of a fluke, or if they've finally really shaken that off and found their groove. So I think next week is going to be really interesting in the East.
Absolutely. And as well, it's certainly good to see the Rock in the win column, like I said, especially with the way they played, the way Nick Rose played, the fact that they all sort of gathered around him right after the goal. Well, the goal was at the end of the game anyway, but right after that, there was sort of an impromptu chant of Rosie, Rosie throughout the stadium. And those kind of chants, particularly in Toronto, don't tend to start by themselves. It's usually the PA announcer says, all right, like everybody, let's go, Rock, go, go, Rock, go. And he starts them up, and then they start after that. But for that to start up without the PA guy, that was really, it was kind of fun. but they still do have quite a mountain to climb if they want to make the playoffs. So it's not just, okay, now we've got that out of the way, let's keep going. There's still a long way to go. Couple of other games, which I guess we'll touch on, but we don't really have much to say because neither of us saw them. Saskatchewan 11, Rochester 8. I was kind of watching this on Twitter, sort of in between periods while I was at the Rock game. And I looked up at one point, it was, 4-1 Saskatchewan and then 8-1 Saskatchewan. I thought, okay, well, this one, I mean, it's the NLL, so you can almost never say, well, this one's over. But it certainly looked like the Rush were off to, possibly a blowout. And then as I kept watching, Rochester's score kept going up and Saskatchewan's didn't. And before long, it was by the middle of the fourth quarter, close to the end of the fourth quarter, it was 10-8 for Saskatchewan. And as we just said a couple minutes ago, 2 goals in 4 minutes is not a big deal in this league. So I didn't get to see the end of it, but Saskatchewan did manage to hold on for an 11-8 win. A game that, from the looks of things, should have been more of a blowout, given how Saskatchewan started. But kudos to Rochester defense for holding on to that, and Rochester offense, I guess, for just chipping away until they got close enough, but they never quite made it back. But being down a bunch of goals and coming back is a theme for this weekend, and we'll get to that in the Vancouver game in a few minutes. The other game was Georgia and Buffalo, and this one was back and forth for a while until it looks like Buffalo took the lead and kept it for most of the second quarter, and then bounced back and forth again until Georgia took the lead. They scored 5 goals in about 3 minutes and managed to hold on to beat the Bandits 19-15, which is almost as high scoring as their previous game a couple of weeks ago. Though that one was more of a Bandits blowout. This one wasn't exactly a blowout, but was certainly Georgia getting some revenge. So let's take a look at the standings in the East. We have the Black Wolves at 4-2. The Swarm and the Bandits are now tied at 4-4. Knighthawks are, I guess, tied with them at 3-3 because they're all 500. And the Rock is out of the winless column at 1-6. And may as well go through the West as well. Mammoth at 6-2 are not way ahead, but quite a ways ahead from the Rush at 4-2. The Stealth are now ahead of the Roughnecks at 3-4, and the Roughnecks are at 3-5. So obviously though either, but any comments on the other two, Melissa?
Yeah, actually do have a few. It's very interesting going back to the Rush and Nighthawks game that technically the game winner was actually scored in the first half. So for the Rush to pretty much fall off the entire second half, for them to have their game winner in the first really shows how much they fell off in that second half and how much Rochester, I think, really had it kind of in their palm to potentially come back. Something definitely wasn't clicking. Or maybe it was just that first quarter, the Rush were just so aggressive, and then they took their foot off the gas and didn't take the rest of the game seriously, and it just started creeping away from them. I would really be curious to see what happened in this game. Where they fell off, or where did Rochester just really turn it on? Because it's so one-sided in that first quarter, and to have the game winner in that second quarter, even though the score, was still expanded on, it really makes me wonder on that one. But going over to the Georgia game and Buffalo, it is very interesting, again, how we've had some seasons where most of the games might be single digits or, maybe about 12 or 13. And then this season, we seem to be having a lot of really, 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 really high scoring games. I mean, I remember when I was first getting into lacrosse, I don't remember it being very uncommon to have scores like what we're seeing with the 1915. I remember some really big scoring games, and that's part of what made it so much fun, was because you were constantly cheering for something, essentially. And so for us to have seen more seasons recently that the scoring was a lot lower, and now we're starting to see some of those big scores. Is really interesting to me, and makes me wonder if it's due to some of the changes that they made in this off season, or if it just happens to be that Buffalo's defense was just tired from playing the night before, and Georgia was just lighten them up a little bit, with a fresh young team. This is definitely, I think, the Swarm team we were expecting to see last year from the way they started. It's very different from last season. So I think they're going to be some strong contenders. It's going to be an interesting season the rest of the year. So it's like we were also discussing with Dane Smith, again, he had 4 goals and 7 assists for 11 points on the night. So you can't argue that he was playing hard. And of course, we had Benesh with 2 goals and 2 assists. So there they are again. You got this tandem that's just really anchoring that team. Whereas you used to have Tavares and Steinhaus, it looks like it's going to kind of be Smith and Benesh for a little while. So yeah, I think our next few weeks are going to be pretty exciting.
Yeah, just looking over the score numbers, I think traditionally they say the average number of goals in an NL game is about 25, and we've seen 6 games in the last 4 weeks, including 4 in the last 2 weeks, with scores above 30. And there's been a 30. Well, Georgia and Buffalo were 34, and last week they were 35. Georgia and Toronto were 37 a couple of weeks ago. So there's been some pretty high scoring games. So and interestingly enough, 3 of those involved Georgia. So they certainly got their offense going, and looks like their defense is having some problems, which is why they're ending up with such high scoring games.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think of the way the Arizona Sting used to be described. Like any of the coaches who would talk about them would say, well, they're a young team, they like to run. And even without seeing what the Swarm are really playing like this season, because unfortunately most of those games haven't been where I can watch them, what I'm seeing from the score sheet just makes me think that they're kind of a young run and gun type team. And maybe that's part of maybe they're making a lot of their goals on transition.
Yeah, it almost sounds like they're so excited to get down to the other end and start scoring goals, and they're worried less about the defensive end of things. But I guess they figure if we can score 18 goals a game, it doesn't matter too much if we give up 15, because we'll end up winning most of them. I'm not sure that's the greatest strategy going forward, but if it works for you, then it works. And they're at 500 right now, which is better than a few other teams. So, yeah, I guess we'll see how well that strategy goes towards the end of the season. The fourth game of the weekend was pretty darn exciting. I only saw not even the second half of it. I was out for the evening on Saturday and came back, turned on the Stealth game at that point, and the Stealth were losing 12-5. And I thought, okay, well, they played really well at home last week, or 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, and not well at home at all in the first couple of games there. So they kind of laid an egg in this one. And from the time I turned the game on to the end of the game, Vancouver scored 9 goals and Calgary scored 1. It was just all Stealth from then on. So I don't know what happened in the first half of the game, so I can't really comment on that, other than Calgary got out to a 6-0 lead at the end of the first. And like I said, we're leading 12-5 halfway through the third. Actually, more than halfway. It wasn't until the 12-minute mark of the third quarter that Vancouver started their run. They scored 8 straight, including 4 in about a minute and a half. Yeah, it was really exciting game actually to watch at that point, because Vancouver's like, hey, we might still be in this. We're only down by 5. We're only down by 4 now. And then by the time they got to within 1 or 2, you can almost see, okay, these guys really believe they can do this. And it was a full team effort. T. Rich was playing really well. I thought he had been pulled into this game at that point. I guess by the time they were down 12-5, they had pulled Penny. I don't know exactly when that happened. But Richards was playing really well. The Vancouver defense was playing really well. Calgary just couldn't really get anything going at that point. There's a lot of posts. Well, both teams actually hit an awful lot of posts. But yeah, the part of the game that I saw was all stealth. The previous part seems to have been all roughnecks, but Vancouver managed to come back and take the lead. Calgary, of course, didn't give up, like they never do, and managed to tie the game with 9 seconds left. And you almost felt bad for both teams at this point because you knew it was going to overtime. Calgary was leading most of the game with a fairly dominating lead at one point, and you almost felt, well, they kind of deserved to win because they were winning most of it. But at the same time, if Vancouver can come back from being 7 goals down and tie it and actually take the lead in the fourth quarter, they deserve to win it as well. So you kind of wanted both of them to win. Of course, that can't happen. And a minute later, Corey Small scored to win it for the Stealth. So great game for the Stealth. Not such a great game for the Roughnecks. That couldn't have been too good for their ego to be up that much and score 1 goal in the last 20-something minutes of the game and just give it away like that. So that's got to hurt. But pretty exciting game to watch. Anything else?
Yeah, it's very interesting to see another game where one of the teams was so dominant in the first quarter and then just kind of fell off for the second half. Well, granted, 4 quarters and the third isn't anything to be shy about, but the fourth quarter definitely. And that's one of those things that we've discussed a few times about Calgary, and that the Roughnecks will start really strong, and it seems like they have been tapering off a little bit and not playing strong the whole game. And so second half is very different with them. It's kind of been that way with the Mammoth too. And Vancouver is definitely one of those teams. Just the rivalries in the West are very strong, just like they are in the East. And so whenever you have certain rivals playing, you just know it's going to be one of those games that it's probably going to come down to the wire. The way that the Mammoth dominated Vancouver last week, I can't even remember who they played. I'm sorry. Usually those games are a 1-goal game, at most 2. So anytime you have this larger gap, that is actually the anomaly. And a lot of the times that's also the way it is with Calgary and Vancouver, where it comes down to overtime or just a couple of goals. And so obviously this one was no different. But to see, as you said, Calgary just dominated that first quarter and something happened and they just didn't hold on to it and really let Vancouver back in that game. I mean, to have 6 goals in the third quarter from Vancouver obviously was all the difference. And it really gave them some momentum to go into that fourth quarter, whereas Calgary just kind of didn't. So it's definitely going to keep the West standings very interesting, especially with Rochester playing not Rochester, the Roughnecks playing the Rush, and the Stealth playing Colorado. I think we might see some change up. The standings, for as dominant as Colorado started off, they're only, a game or 2 up over a couple of teams. So it's still anybody's game. And so the Mammoth really need to keep an eye on their backside. They got 3 very strong opponents gunning for them, and they could blink and be on the losing end just like the Roughnecks were this weekend.
Yeah, it's interesting that both Saskatchewan and Calgary got off to really strong starts, and then, like you said, it kind of looked like they took their foot off the pedal, and the Rush managed to hold on, and the Roughnecks didn't. But yeah, I guess those 2 games were kind of similar in that way. But well, luckily for Saskatchewan, they managed to hold on. I don't think I'd want to be in the Roughnecks dressing room after that one. Moving on to our predictions. Each of us went 2-2 last week. We all got the Rush over Rochester. Tyler and I got the Vancouver game, and you got the Georgia Buffalo game, correct?
Uh-huh.
So 2-2 for everybody. I'm now 12-20, not so good. Tyler is 1 ahead of me at 13-19, and you are leading the pack at 17-15. We didn't get any predictions from Tyler this week because he was not able to do that before he had to go. So we'll leave that for now. And since you're ahead in the standings by quite a bit still, you get to go first.
It's funny how this keeps happening, especially since you guys are moving that gap a little bit. This week I found really hard to make some of these picks, and part of that is because past performance isn't necessarily always the best indicator, and some of the teams can be so hit or miss that it was really hard to make a case for or against in some of them, or both cases were just so strong. So I'm definitely not as confident going forward in this week's picks as I sometimes am. With the Bandits and the Rush, that one was really tough because I could see either team really taking that one. But the Rush have been playing pretty strong, and with the Bandits having such an undisciplined weekend, I could see them playing one of two ways. One of them coming out really strong and really disciplined against the Rush and taking it, or two, still being so angry from the loss and still playing undisciplined. And I'm not sure which one I will vote for. I'm expecting that this is probably going to be a pretty tight game, but we're going to have to see. I think if Buffalo stays disciplined, this one could come down to a goal or maybe overtime. But if they lose their discipline, I think the Rush have an easy game. With Vancouver and Colorado, that one's always a hard one. But as I've said on previous shows, Vancouver loves to come and win in Denver. And in most recent years, even when the Stealth have not been playing well, they have managed to win in Colorado. It used to be that the Mile High City really impacted the other teams, but so few of the Mammoth players actually live here anymore. I don't see it as being a benefit, and sometimes it does seem to help the other team. So I'm going to go with Vancouver on this one. With Rochester and Toronto, I think that one is going to be a very interesting game, and it's really going to show us whether this weekend was a fluke for the Rock or if they've kind of started moving forward and have made the changes that are needed to actually continue on and win some more games. I'm going with Rochester because past performance, we don't know what Toronto's going to do yet, and so we're going to go with the Knighthawks there. But it's going to be interesting if Toronto does win. It's going to change, I think, a lot in the East. With Swarm in New England, I'm going to pick Georgia. They were definitely the underdogs coming in. They didn't play very well last year, but this season they've had some very strong performances, and they might actually be a stronger team than a lot of people gave them credit for going in. With the Rush and Calgary, that one was a tough one. Both teams always play really hard when they play one another, and even though Calgary has dominated many years, the Rush actually have kind of taken that a little bit over the past couple seasons. However, I'm going to give this game to Calgary simply because the Rush are playing back-to-back games against two very tough opponents, and I just don't know if they're going to have enough in the gas tank when they face Calgary. So we're going to go with the Roughnecks there. What about you?
Okay, yeah, this one was tough as well. There's a few games here that could certainly go either way. Buffalo, Saskatchewan. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. If Buffalo can stay out of the penalty box, they can certainly make this one a really close game. And I think that I don't know. I kind of think the penalty trouble that Buffalo got into was partially because they were playing the Rock, who's their biggest rival, and a team that they don't like the Rock basically, and the Rock don't like the Bandits, which is fun. But I think it probably led to more penalties than usual. So I think they'll probably cool it down a little bit for next week, but I'm still going to pick the Rush to take that one. Vancouver, Colorado. I would imagine this win this week really gave the Stealth a lot of confidence, and so I'm going to go with the Stealth on that one. The West standings even more interesting. Rochester, Toronto. I kind of think that the Rock have turned a corner. Obviously, they won this past weekend. They played well, but lost in their previous couple of games. Played mostly well. Their defense wasn't great, but they played a lot better than the first 4 games, that's for sure. So I think they're kind of, if they haven't turned the corner, they're in the process of turning the corner. So I expect a pretty good game from them next week, but I think I'm still going to go with the Knighthawks on that one. Georgia, New England. Yeah, this one could be fun, and this is another one of these. Just judging by the last few Georgia games, this could be another 19-17 kind of game. But New England looks like the real deal. We kind of thought that last year, but only after a couple of games, and then they kind of fell off and then didn't finish very strongly at all. But they certainly look a lot more like a legitimate contender this year. And the Swarm sometimes look like that and sometimes don't. Just because of that inconsistency, I think I'm going to go with New England on this one. And Saskatchewan, Calgary. This one could be a fun game as well. It's odd because I look at the Vancouver game or the Vancouver Calgary game this week and think, okay, well, Vancouver's going to take that confidence they got from that game into next week and win. And I don't look at Calgary and say, okay, well, they got beaten in that game pretty badly, really, because they had it sewn up, really. But I don't think that's going to affect them this week. For some reason, I think they'll turn that around. But I'm still going to go with the Rush. I just think they're a stronger team. They're starting to look a little more human this year than they have in the past couple. But I still feel like I'm going to go with the Rush on that one. Yeah, it looks like the Rush are going 0-2 if I get my picks correct. And seeing as I'm way under 500, I'm not sure that's something to go by. But yeah, we'll see what happens. So I guess that's the end of a fairly short show. Anything else you want to add, Melissa?
I'm really looking forward to this weekend. I think since we're kind of at that midpoint in the season, a lot of teams might be turning it around, and some other teams that started off really strong might be fading. And so I think this weekend is going to be key for most of them to really kind of set the theme, the pace, whatever you want to say, for the rest of the season. So I'm really excited. I hope more of these games are going to be available on ESPN, though. It really sucked for me that all of them were on Fox this weekend and 2 of them were on Fridays, which I 100% can't watch.
Well, there's only one Friday game this week, and that's Buffalo, Saskatchewan. And there's 2 Saturday night and then 2 Sunday. I believe the 2 Sunday games are both in the afternoon. And if I can find it quickly enough, I have the broadcast schedule. Let's see where they are available. Now NLL.com is deciding to be slow. Usually this page comes right up.
It's really disappointing this season because I know I'm not the only fan that is running into this. And then you look at the potential of new fans that can't even discover these games. And it is really frustrating that they've gone this route. I mean, I would have taken even a shoddy B2 type service over what we currently have. I don't know why they didn't at least continue with the NLL streaming service, whatever they were using last year. I know there was a lot of complaints, but you think, okay, you've worked out the bugs. Let's move forward with it.
So Friday night's game is Rochester-Toronto game, and both of the Sunday games are on Fox. The Colorado-Vancouver game on Saturday night is on TSN2 in Canada as well as TSN Go, and on ESPN in the USA. So you should at least be able to see that one. Most of the ESPN games are available after the fact, are they not? It's just the Fox ones you can't see later on?
Yeah, the Fox ones offer absolutely no replay. The ESPN ones do, but sometimes that depends on the feed. Because even when we had Altitude, sometimes the games were not shown live, and the games would be replayed sometimes as much as 2 or 3 days later. So if you can't watch the game until Tuesday night,
Yeah.
And they show them at odd times too.
Well, hopefully you can see more games this weekend. Yeah, so hopefully we'll have Tyler back next week as well. and we might even have some video of Melissa, so that would be great as well.
That is the goal. The new computer I bought actually has issues and is being sent back.
Oh, no.
So the goal for next week, I will have a computer I can use besides my desktop without a webcam.
All right, well, we're looking forward to seeing that. I guess that'll do it. So this has been another episode of Addicted to Lacrosse. For Melissa and the absent Tyler, I'm Graham. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.